Welcome, my friends, to Peace, Love, and Bring It Back, the podcast that never ends, where we gather our clan and talk about the peace and love in our lives, the difficulties along the journey, and how we rise up from them. We will experience a little thing I call Kluberty together, and by the end of the show, we're going to find our sweet spot. I'm Uncle Dave, and our transformation starts right here. Hey now, and how are you doing? Want to welcome you to the next episode of Peace, Love, and Bring It Back. Today's guest is a two-time Paralympian mindset coach, TEDx speaker. We're going to hear so much about James Roberts. How you doing, James?
I'm very well, thank you, Dave, and thanks again for having me on.
Yeah, no, I'm honored. Well, first, I had mentioned about Paralympics, and I learned something at with one of my last guests, Dylan, the difference between the Special Olympics and Paralympics. And I didn't know it, and I apologize for not knowing that, but that's the great thing about learning. Could you explain to us, really what it makes you become a Paralympian?
Well, I think the similarities, obviously, is the disability. So be it Special Olympics is learning disabilities, and up until or recently, obviously, they'd been excluded from the Paralympics because of, I'm trying not to get this wrong, it'd been the Sydney Games where the Spanish team sent it's a S14 classification, which is for the mental disabilities, and obviously there'd been journalists embed themselves in the teams to kind of showcase cheating, and they'd been banned up until, I think it was, and don't quote me on this, I think it's either London 2012 or Rio 2016 that they were back into the games. And the only difference between those ones that are in the Paralympics and the ones that are Special Olympics is the ones that Special Olympics are a little bit more disabled in terms of they've got more needs, whereas maybe the ones that are in the Paralympics you probably wouldn't be able to tell as much. It's just that you've got to maybe give more information to that individual, whereas the rest of the Paralympic whereas the rest of the Paralympic movement is relatively very easy to see. It'll be visual impairments, physical impairments like myself, wheelchair users, cerebral palsy, so they're generally speaking disabilities that have been from birth, and obviously you're going to have those that have acquired maybe spinal injuries or amputations later in life because of a traumatic experience.
Yeah, no, and that's the one of the incredible parts. Much, that you've had this your entire life. You've battled your entire life like this, and you've been pushing yourself the whole time. I think you shared on your TEDx that your mom said, do you want to be very good or absolutely useless? And, there's a motivation in that. And how'd you motivate yourself? Because being a Paralympian, a two-time Paralympian, it's not, that means you not only did you make it that first time, you continue to motivate. And I'd love to hear the story about that.
Well, it's that initial buzz. The first one has the and I've reshared the video quality. It shows how old the video is, but I reshared it not too long ago, like the behind the scenes at my first Paralympics. And to give some people some context, once it was the closing ceremony, I got the bug. It's like, I like these 2 weeks. That was enough motivation to do it again. It's like, I want to do it again. How I'm going to get there, I don't know. But hey, let's see where it takes us. And in terms of the motivation initially, I've always been sporty as a kid. I've always been around those individuals. Sport has been front and center and probably much the holy grail if it came down to it. So I think it was only a natural progression that I got into high level sport. If you'd asked me probably 20 years ago, would I have made the Paralympics? I'd probably laughed at you in seriousness, because it was something that was like, it was so far out of reach. It's like, well, I think this is a luxury that the kids nowadays have got. They've got social media, they've got Instagram, they've got TikTok. They can see these individuals up close in the flesh. So it's within touching distance. You can ask these individuals questions. But you rewind back to my days, and it's about 20 years ago. It was only a 2-hour program on TV for Paralympics. So it's come a long way in 20 years. But my motivation for me, David, I always wanted to be an athlete. I had this idea of either being a professional basketball player or playing soccer at high level. And up until probably when I became a teenager, it's like this aspirational goal you have is unrealistic. It's not attainable. So I had to reevaluate it, and I'm going to say it was a chance meeting, poolside. As a 15-year-old, one of my coaches approached me one day. Have you thought about doing disability sport? I didn't know what to say, because up until the age of probably about 16, I'd always competed in able-bodied sports. So for me, it's an unknown, and to a certain extent, it was a challenge, because it's like, well, are you saying I can't compete with able-bodied people? I know I compete within reason. I'm not being unrealistic. That people are going to beat me, and that's one of the reasons my mum did put me into swimming, that I couldn't have people run rings around me. But I looked down upon probably the Paralympics back then as well. It's like, well, it's not getting the credit it's deserved. The word in itself means parallel to the Olympics. 20 years ago, it was far from that. And that's a realistic statement. So for me, looking at it, it's like, well, it's not getting the coverage that it deserves. Why should I give it credit? But I let it stew over. Waited probably a couple of weeks. Approached my head coach, who was also coaching off base, and he knew of a coach who was disabled himself, coaching an able-bodied club, and they gave me the contact details, and pretty much the rest is history.
That's awesome. I mean, not only were you open to it, obviously not at the beginning, because you wanted to, and not saying it the right way, but be like everybody else, but you weren't a fully able-bodied. Well, so because this is on video as well, and people might not know you, what are your challenges? What were your challenges, physical challenges that you were facing?
It depends day to day. I wear a prosthetic leg, so most people would be aware of that now because of the Paralympics, and it's kind of been amputation and people wearing prosthetic limbs kind of been normalized. It's like, it's no big deal. It's like, you take it off, put another one on, and away you go. So for me, if we backtrack to give what exactly the actual disability is I'm missing my femur bone, so I don't have the top portion of my thigh bone, and I've got a small tibia and fib, which is the bottom section of the leg. So I have my what is below the knee attached to my hip. So it's, for me growing up, it was weird because nobody was like me, and it wasn't until I actually came across and immersed myself into the Paralympic movement, starting to see people that are similar to me. Okay, I'm not unique. There are other people like me, and obviously that's probably when I started to embrace it a lot more. It's like, well, there's people like me. You can obviously have a conversation and talk about your experiences up until that point, and it probably normalized it to me. It's okay, I don't need to hide it away. I don't need to look at it in a certain way of wanting to be anything but disabled. It's like, hey, it's given me, obviously now I reflect 20 years on, it's given me a sporting career, it's given me a platform, it's given me access to come on your show. The door pretty much swings wide open, but if it's not for having that disability, most of that doesn't happen.
Well, it's also you embracing your own authenticity. I think that's the part of that. And I know during your talk, you talked about procrastination perfection. So, right, we all stop ourselves because we have to wait for that perfect moment. But as you know, there might not be a perfect moment, but it's that moment that we have that growth moment. And it sounds like you had that growth moment when you found the Paralympic movement.
Well, I think I was willing to own it. I think I was looking for any solution in the past to be normal. Mm-hmm. I think now as an adult, what is normal? That doesn't exist. Everybody's got a disability of some kind, whether or not they want to admit to that. I have a physical one. I can't hide away from it. Pretty much now, I think somebody asked me a couple of weeks ago on another podcast, do you wear shorts all the time? Pretty much. I don't think I'm going to maybe change that because we've got a cold front coming in at the moment, and it feels like January, not April. So that puts into question. But I'm not afraid to wear shorts. Hey, if people want to ask me questions, fire away. If you've got something that you want answered, hey, I don't care. I'm more than open for you to have a greater awareness and for you get a greater understanding. It does annoy me when parents probably pull their kids away when they want to ask, and they're always going to be inquisitive. So I think the last time that happened, the parent actually told the person to shut up. It's like, I've got no problem to answer the question. Okay, I'll give some sympathy to that parent. I had a mask on, so you can't tell I would have been open to answer that question because you can't. He wants to ask why that person got a robot leg. Mm-hmm. I can roll with that any way I want to. I can make some humor out of it, but that's because I've come to accept and embrace that I'm different. I'm quite happy to be the person on the periphery if it helps other people to kind of go, okay, he's comfortable with what he's got. How does he achieve that? And obviously that's taken probably a decade to be really, really comfortable with it, because it was challenging as for any teenager. It's traumatic anyway. But
right, once you're different as a teenager, it's going to be a huge challenge, and no matter what you are, if you're different, if all of your friends look like this and you don't look like that, it's going to be different, and including you had the extra challenge of your physical body wasn't what everybody else was. But you also were talking about playing soccer. I don't want that to be left aside, that somebody with a prosthetic leg and needed challenges by not having all the physical pieces that an able-bodied person has. He wasn't, James wasn't sitting back and going, okay, I'm going to do that. He focused on the right things. I mean, I want to make sure everybody hears his story, and the impact of his story is he didn't let his how he was brought in, his authenticity, hold him back. He actually is embracing that. How do you focus on the right things?
Oh, that's a great question, Dave. How do I think everybody's got a problem with that. They lose focus. Their attention is. I think we're in a world that we're easy to get distracted. So how do I stay focused? I lose my way from time to time, or lose focus on the important things because something's shiny over here. Let's go look at that. So it does happen to me as well. I think when I was younger, I had those blinkers on because I was going to stop at nothing. My family would probably even say to this day, I've still got some aspect of that self-centeredness. It was pretty much tunnel vision, head down, and away we go. And obviously, if I only looked at it two ways, I look at it three ways now. But back then, I'm going to give you two choices: you step aside, or I run you over. And that was simple. Whereas maybe I would give somebody another ultimatum as an adult. Do you want to come on? Do you want to jump on my back and ride my coattails? But back then I didn't give much choice. It's move out of the way. I'm coming through, and you've got two choices. You step aside, or I run you down. So the focus was probably laser focused. I did lose sight of it from time to time, where my mother was probably a prominent figure in me succeeding initially, I think I was in my senior year in high school, and I wanted to be with my friend and go to a tournament. She's like, no. Who pays you? And the answer was back then British Swimming. You're going to swim in this competition. And that's the end of the debate. I wasn't very happy because I wanted to do what I wanted to do. But as an adult, I agree fully with what she said, because it's like it's absolutely right. Because ultimately, yes, I'm paid by that governing body, but that's my livelihood that I want to aspire to.
Right.
You need to make the right choice and focus on what's an important thing. Yes, you want to hang out with your friends and you want to be cool. That's great, but that's not the priority that you wanted. I didn't want to hear that at 19 years old, but it's the truth. It's like, that's what I wanted to go, and I got my own way. Initially, and my mum said, "No, you're not going to that tournament. Don't care what you say. You're going to swim at this competition because you got to get your priorities right."
Right. You always. I
did okay in that championships. I got a couple of gold medals. But I was talking to her a couple of days ago about it. It'd be interesting to see what was behind the eyes of that person. I might be smiling in the picture, but what am I thinking? I don't know. But it would be interesting to step back into that reality and thinking, what are my processes? Yes, I've done very well. Yes, but do I really want to be somewhere else?
Well, that's the important part, is, keeping that focus. And sometimes we lose focus. It's very easy, right? There's so many distractions, as you said, and I mentioned about the shiny objects. We get it. And, as a teenager, we definitely don't understand all the shiny objects. And there's just way too many, especially in today's world. So how do you currently use your motivation and focus on to make sure that you're not chasing a shiny object, but to stay true to yourself, kind of like how Mom said?
I think now it's I've got a great support network of, be it my peers, my business coach, my family, my clients, my audience of the amputee community. They put things into perspective, because ultimately it doesn't matter what I want to talk about, as much as I'd like to hear my sound of my own voice. But if they don't want to listen, I got a massive problem. So my focus is to educate, first and foremost, to give people the missing gaps, the things that are missing for that community, because there's, if it's not, they've been let down by the industry that I work in, they've been told they can't do this, that, or the other. That irritates me, because it's like, well, if that individual was to say that to me, I wouldn't take that as gospel. I'd be, okay, why are you creating red tape when there doesn't need to be any? You're just either scared because you're out of your depth, and there are fitness professionals that won't even approach me in the gym. I don't know why, because I'm not an intimidating figure, but I guess because my knowledge is so good, so I won't say perfect, but it's pretty good because of 10 years in sports. I've been pretty much living in a gym since I was allowed to. So my experience and trial and error is probably greater than maybe somebody that's never stepped foot in the gym before, but maybe before the amputation. So I'll listen to people when they say, well, why do you do this and not do that? I'm not thought about that. That brings whereas if you're not having that approachability, it's like, well, I don't know what to take of you. So for me, that it's a focus that recenters me, because it's like, well, okay, I might look to problem solve with something shiny, because it's like, well, okay, things aren't going particularly well, let's do something drastic. That never works, because ultimately, and I've seen this video loads of times, it's based on about studying, about taking breaks and taking a step back. So there's nothing wrong with doing 30 minutes, as the video would say, take 5-minute break, 30 minutes, as opposed to slogging it out and spending hours revising or studying, how you want to call it, and you take nothing in.
Right.
For me, when I saw that, I was like, my head nearly exploded, because it's like, no wonder when I was in high school, I'd be staring up at the walls or the ceiling, because I think the system doesn't help, because it don't tell you to revise, to study as you go on. You have a test, exam at the end, you do at the end. It's too late, because you're already playing catch up. Whereas you look at the nerds or the smart kids, they're doing that all year long, but they get judged. Oh, that's not cool.
Right. It's
but it's probably the better way to do it, because ultimately, come the test or the exam, all you're doing is reviewing the information, as opposed to doing like me, studying. Some of the information might come in, some of it might not, and obviously once that exam's done, you take on the next information, and you might even not retain that information. So the focus for me is bringing back and reviewing stuff. It's looking at what's my audience telling me that they want to learn about. So get them involved in terms of, well, yes, it's my business, but if I can get more and more people engaged, that they are tangibles, and without them there's not going to be success. It brings greater success, because if I ask you, Dave, what you want to learn about, you're going to be invested to want to stick around.
Right, and it's that consistency. So like you said about the nerds, or even people who work out every day, it's about consistency. You can't just work out, once and go, okay, I'm done, I'm here, right? You don't go to school once. And you're right, even in school, when we were going to school, the learning is, everybody learns differently. So you might need breaks earlier, but that doesn't mean that, again, when you're working out, right, you might work hard for 20 minutes straight, 10-minute rest, and then go back for another 20 minutes. We'll be back in a moment.
Hi there, I'm Lainey.
And I'm Estella. And we're interrupting this podcast because we have a question for this audience.
Do you or someone you know live with a disability or a chronic condition?
If yes, you're not alone. 1 in 5 people in the U.S. do.
We're the hosts of the Embrace It podcast, where we share tips, tools, and inspiration for everyday living with all types of disabilities.
Our interviews with badass disability advocates will boost your confidence in all areas of life, including travel, fashion, relationships, career, and more.
So walk or roll on over to your favorite podcast player and subscribe to Embrace It with Lainey and Estella.
And now back to the show you were listening to. Another great show produced by Launchpad 516 Studios.
You're listening to Peace, Love, and Bring It Back with me, Uncle Dave Shemetsky. So how do you keep balance? What brings you into the balance?
Well, the one that probably keeps me grounded, Dave, is remembering I can't look after other people if I don't look after myself. So there's that fine line between, work, but if I don't take care of my body physically, mentally, emotionally, it's very hypocritical of me to say to other people, hey, how much weight have you lost this week? How are you feeling emotionally? How are you feeling mentally and emotionally this week? If they say bad, I can't really say anything if I'm not doing that myself. So what keeps me balanced is probably now I've reestablished that love for sport. So sport is not a chore. You wouldn't have to force me to go to practice anymore. There was come a time, maybe 5 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, because I wasn't playing as much. Oh gosh, what's the point? What's the point in rocking up to practice? I'm not going to get the minutes. I'm not taking responsibility at that particular moment in time. Whereas now it's like, okay, the hard work is there. You enjoy going. Some respite. And you're talking about balance. We don't have practice tonight. We normally practice tonight as we're recording on Tuesday. that's some respite for me from work, because it's like, for these 3-4 hours, you can't get hold of me. It's my day finishes at this particular time. It's got to be pretty urgent if I look at it. Then I might look at messages just to like to prioritize after I finish, to kind of go, well, I could wait till tomorrow. Maybe I need to respond to that now. But that won't be a case of, it's like down tools normally in about an hour and a half, and then I'll pick up about tomorrow. But obviously today, because of COVID and things like that, we've had practice cancelled. So I've got to tweak my Tuesday slightly to get some exercise in a different way and things like that. But it's coming back to that balance of, well, it's my opportunity to do things that I like, and to be able to give practical input to other individuals of, okay, I've tried this, be it meditation, mindfulness, looking at sleep in a different way, so you can reclaim some of that time back for yourself, which I think people sometimes don't grasp a hold, because it's like, oh, I'm not as important as my husband, my kids. I'm not going to say the men definitely do it, but I maybe take advantage of that. But for the ladies, they give over some of that. I'm going to generalize a little bit. They probably give over that I need to take care of other people, but who's take care of you? So it's looking at ways in which that you can reclaim some of that me time for you. It could be getting your hair done, getting nails done. For the males, going to the barbers, getting their beard shaved, something that's going to make you feel positively about yourself. And there's that balance. Okay, I work in an industry that's very judgmental. Appearance is very prominent. I got to be well groomed. I got to shave. I've got to be well dressed, because that's what people expect. For me, that's okay, because hey, I want to look nice. I'm quite photogenic. So these things.
And that's how you set your boundaries. So
there's my boundaries. So because those are my times to do something that's okay. Going to the barbers or going to the hairdressers is no big deal. But if you take pride in, hey, I need to look a certain way, and that's my style, so to speak. Hey, that's a standard then that you set, and then obviously you set boundaries in terms of, if it goes too far to one extreme or the other, okay, I'm not comfortable with that. That needs to maybe teeter back, back to the middle, or maybe I'm being a little bit too friendly. I need to bring it back a little bit. If I'm being maybe a little bit, I've got a tendency of, and probably I can see probably why, not always being empathetic with people. It's very robotic answers. It's very straight to the fact. There's nothing held back. So sometimes that's not very. If I do that so much with you, you won't want to come back to the conversation. Oh, James is going to just ask. It's going to bombard me with questions. Nah, I don't want to deal with that. So I've taken it upon myself. Well, okay, let's be a little bit more of a human being. Be a little bit curious, inquisitive. Ask people questions in a different way, and they're going to be more responsive. So that's that balance. And I'm talking about.
It definitely is a balance, and learning about yourself and continuing to grow and learning about yourself. How do you continue to grow for yourself?
I think for me, David, it's going back to the school days. I got to a point where I finished education. I was like, I've learned everything. I don't need to know anything more. And that's obviously where you come unstuck, because it's like, well, you can learn so much from people, people watching, and just observing, and you're going to learn things very, very quickly. So for me, it took hitting rock bottom, of pretty much everything going unanimously wrong to kind of go, well, you're unhappy. Why? And work myself back up. I was in a job that for manners I hated. I was working in education for a little bit between the business I run now and the previous one, just to pay the bills. And obviously, working in high school as a member of staff is very, very hard. And it doesn't matter. You're not appreciated by the kids. Obviously, some you are, and you're not really respected by the hierarchy. So for me, I'm not going to say it was a totally miserable experience. There's some things that I probably can take away for the next generation as how to communicate to them and communicate on their level. But for me, it was like, well, I'm not happy. I got very, very anxious and didn't know what I pretty much had a panic attack at work, and I thought I was having a heart attack, and I had to go to hospital. And after it was when I did eventually go back to work. There's like, well, do you want to go see a counsellor? I'm in an hour inside my head. Well, if you're going to recommend I do it, obviously yes, because then anything come back to, if I had to do something I wasn't comfortable with, I bring mental health up to kind of go, well, you advised me to go see a counsellor, so obviously it's something that I'm not comfortable. I could use it as, it's not great to say this, but like as an excuse or a barrier to create, well, I'm not doing it because of this. It's going to impede on my mental well-being. You need to get somebody else to do it. But the conversation I had with that counsellor was, I think the initial conversation was, James, do you want to get into a state that you can go back to work and go back into that job, or do you want to work towards doing something else? And I know heart to heart, it's like, well, I don't particularly want to stick around in this job because it's slowly killing me. So I was like, well, let's work on obviously getting me ready for the business that I now have 4 years later. So I was building my building blocks and doing my I'll call it 9 to 5. It's not 9 to 5, it's 9 to 3 really. And a lot of staff would ask me, well, why are you up at 6 o'clock in the morning? We can see you on Facebook and you slog. We can't see what you're doing, but we can see that you're slogging away. It's like, well, that's my time. That's something that I enjoy between the hours of, it wasn't always 6 o'clock, but say before I went into the school, I'd work on the business to get the ball rolling and do the groundwork. So pretty much once that job finished, boom, I hit the ground running, as opposed to a lot of people, you mentioned the perfect time. That's not perfect time. So if I had hit the ground, I think I finished on the 31st of March. If I'd have started on April Fool's Day and done no work, it would have been an uphill struggle. Whereas I was like, well, I'm going to do the market research. I'm going to try and market myself gradually, that people can gain some trust and like. It's like, well, we like what you're doing, and then boom, once I move over, this is me now fully in this. I'm gonna see what happens. So for me, that alone, that journey was monumentous, because everything that I was doing changed. The way that I ate, the way that I held myself in the school. I had a particular student body say a comment to me. They said my sporting career was not a success.
Yeah,
no. I knew I was back, because I went boom. I can't humiliate this kid because I'll be in trouble. Mm-hmm. But I need to put him in line, because you're not speaking to me like that.
Well, it's setting those boundaries.
I'd got that much respect back of myself that I'd lost, not just because of that job, but little by little through retirement. And I'd gone through a phase of like an entitlement of the world owes me everything because of what I'd done in sport. That's far from the truth. I know that now. And I slowly lost myself because I didn't have an identity. It's like, well, I was an athlete. Now I don't see myself as an athlete. I can't get a career going for the love of it. And you guys obviously have a welfare state, and so do we. That didn't help me, because they made things so easy to, oh, well, you just need to do this. I'm not going to say no. If you make it easy for me, I'm not going to challenge it. I probably would have done years ago, and I would do now, and kind of go, well, this just because I got a disability, why are you making life easy? And it took probably family kind of going, well, hang on a second, James. You sitting around the house and pretty much wasting your life away. We got a problem with it, and that was a wake up call for me, because it's like, you're right. I need to do something about this. And that was the first inklings of getting into coaching the first time around. Is, okay, if I can't get a position working for somebody else, why don't I go work for myself? And I there was no self-doubt. There was no thinking about the risks. There was no what could go wrong. Hey, let's do this and see what happens. Obviously, I would tell people don't do that. Don't do that without preparation now, because that's very. I would say that's probably like borderline lunacy. But obviously, it didn't work out. I know now why, because I was relying on word of mouth, referrals. I don't do that anymore. It's like, hey, if you recommend me to somebody else, it'd be wonderful that person signed up. There's no guarantee of it. If he does, hey, I'll brace them with open arms. If they don't, it's not the end of the world. I keep going on as I've been doing from a consistent basis anyway. So there's been a lot of learning curves all along that journey that I've used to even if things go wrong, it's a massive reminder of, okay, that is the extreme of your business going to the wall. You're not going to let that happen, and you're going to do. I'm not going to say whatever it takes to make sure, like lie, steal. I wouldn't resort to that, because it doesn't ethically or morally sit with me, and I'd feel probably sick to my guts with it. But it reminds me of, hey, I'm dealing with human beings. I'm dealing with people. They're going to say no. There's going to come a point where they no longer see me as a valuable asset. Hey, that's okay, because ultimately there might be a come a time where I don't see things as valuable, be it, I don't know, I might make people jump hurdles just because I want to come on my podcast, or be it's been a challenge to get something scheduled in. Okay, is that going to make a big difference? Yes or no? It might be that I have to make a balance and come to some sort of agreement where, okay, the person maybe not have a scheduling app. Right. I don't know who wouldn't in this day and age, but there are people out there, and hey, who's for me to judge that? Because they don't.
It's also understanding a little bit more about people and how you do that. I mean, that's really what you explained to us about your rock bottom is, that Phoenix moment that we talk about and rising from it, because you started to understand more about yourself and being your most authentic self. And that was really the part, because life is not just generally black and white. As you've been speaking about things, life is actually a lot more grays than there's not, because it's not always, maybe as a parent, it might be a, yes, you could do something, no, you can't. But there's also the gray as to why, right? Even that story that you shared earlier about your mom wanted to help you keep that focus, even though as a teenager, you were like, my friends are my focus.
Well, I think it's, and she's been there throughout that whole journey. It's like, well, if it wasn't for her, if we rewind even before that, going down to the bottom of a grandstand to shout over to get something from a delegation, for me that's humiliating, because that's me and it's embarrassing. But if she wasn't willing to do something that's massively out of somebody's comfort zone, because it's unnatural to want to put yourself front and center, and people the people probably stop in their tracks and turn back. What's that person doing? Mm-hmm. It's the same. I think my family's always been like that in terms of my grandmother didn't get to see the finished article, but she was one of those people. Well, if James wants to do this, hey, let's support her. My mum's I won't say she's scared of it. I think she was scared of the consequences of not having done that. And I'm not saying my grandmother's like a dragon, but it was one of those things where if she hadn't have, laid the breadcrumbs, there's going to be consequences. So I think once I got closer to the Paralympics, I owe my mum a lot. I owe my family a lot. Okay, it's taken probably to my competing in London. I have my name on the back, my family's name on the back of my jersey. Kind of go, okay, this is us cementing, putting the Roberts on the map. How is it going to be for the next generations that have me all over the internet? I don't know, because as far as I'm concerned, there might be some negativity out there, but for the majority, it's quite positive, and it can be. I had to do a school project years ago as a 10th grader about family history. I found the paper a couple of years ago. I've digitized that because, hey, the piece of paper was ripped, and also it's like, well, this is family history. Mine is not going anywhere because the internet's not going anywhere. You can add to that, and be it the next generations, okay, if they want to be sportsmen or women, that's great. If they don't, it's just making them great human beings, and it kind of goes, well, this is my dad, my granddaddy did this in sport. I want to go over in this direction. I want to go into art or something like that, and kind of the sky's the limit. And I think I was asked this a couple of weeks ago. I had another podcast about why do you think you became successful as an athlete? It's like, well, I think the genes a little bit, because my mother was a county level swimmer over here, so like state. My dad played 3 sports in high school, and my voice doesn't sound like I'm American, but half American, and that's unheard. Well, it doesn't exist anymore. Free letterman in high school, it doesn't exist. It's because of that obsession of, there's got to be, if you want to succeed, you got to pick one sport and you stick with it. So be it basketball, American football, track, But I think people do miss a step, because you can learn things from other sports. Of who's to say that person is going to be a success? And finish the article. At the end of it, are they going to make it to the league? The odds are probably not, but I'm not trying to blemish people and discourage them from their dream, but I think it's like less than 1%. Right. So the likelihood of you succeeding is the odds is almost like, it's probably worse than a casino. The odds are stacked against you massively. But for me, I think the Paralympics is, I say it's easier than maybe able-body sport. The pool of people is obviously a lot smaller, so the likelihood to succeed is far greater. But having those individuals that have got your back helps. And be it, if it wasn't my mom, if it wasn't my performance director, it was more like an uncle that had my back to kind of going. I think the greatest story that I'll bring it up was he asked me, "Do you want to have physio?" I said, "I don't need it." I'm not asking you, I'm telling you, because you got more experience. You've had I can't remember if it was a practice or a trial, and obviously I exerted myself. It's like, I don't really need it. How old would I be? About 19, 20 years old. Think he knows it all. Person telling me, I don't care what you think, James, you're going to have it, because then flush out all the toxins and you'll be ready to go again the next day. I definitely know that now at 35. If I don't do things like that, I'm going to feel it. Yeah. Either tomorrow or the next day or the next day. And obviously people 30s, 40s, they can relate, because it's not as easy as when you're a teenager and in your early 20s to recover. So for me, if you don't have those people in your life, it's a little bit more of a uphill battle. And I think the better story is he did a bit of psychological warfare with one of my competitors in front of me. We sat down at a table one day, It'd been my first year in rowing. And I couldn't believe the person taking it in, because it's like, some of it was true, some of it wasn't. And I'm like, you're so gullible, because I would have pushed back, because it's like, okay, if James is doing this, prove it.
Mm-hmm.
If he's that good, let's go on the water. We were supposed to have a race. He backed down and he was shouting to his coaches, why am I not getting all the support? I had pretty much what's in the United Kingdom, obviously there's England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. I had a country behind me, because he'd sold this vision of James going to the Paralympics, and that governing body. It's like, well, what do we need? Well, let's throw the kitchen sink at it. Whatever he needs is his. So, and I still keep in touch to this day. But training 1-to-1, all I had to do was travel like an hour each way. But 1-to-1 coaching twice a day, and obviously this other person is like, well, why am I? It's kind of, you can see like city folks are very intimidated, but because he was like London based, like, why am I not getting this? It's like, well, because the support I've got, and to give some context, Disability Sport Wales is like the envy of the rest of the island.
Mm-hmm.
The family that they've created is, it doesn't matter if the athlete's in a different sport. We're like family. We keep in touch. We ask each other, and you kind of feed off each other. It's like, well, there's one. He competed at 6 games just gone in Beijing this year, and I was chatting to him last year because he'd come out of retirement. It's like, what was the pull to come back? He asked me, would I come out of retirement? I was like, no, I'm quite happy. I'm quite happy being retired and watching. Now, maybe a couple of years ago, he might have got me. It's like, I know the hard work that goes into it. I'm quite happy watching now, and being the armchair critic. if you don't do something right, and kind of go, okay, you could maybe done this right, and they'll probably take that for face. Okay, maybe you're right. Maybe you're wrong, James. And him in particular, he'd competed in, I thought it was his 5th or his 4th when I asked him, but if it'd been his 6th, I know he competed in Turin in 2006 in the Winter Games, and that's enough to be around somebody that's been. It's like, well, you've been there, why can't I do it? And it's very much a family of support of, they big each other up. So once you make the national team, the Paralympics GB, you already know a lot of people anyway. Be it Beijing, I think the team was a bit smaller, but be probably at least 10 of us.
Yeah, well, I guess that's the important part is surrounding yourself. So, like, as being a coach now is you got to keep learning, as we were talking earlier, and also surrounding yourself with people who are going to push you, motivate you, get your back when you need to have your back gotten, and that's really important. So, what do you do now? Besides, we'll tie up the episode coming up. So, what are some gems that you'd love to leave with us? Because you've given us a lot of motivational. Not giving up, and how to keep pushing yourself. What are some gems that you'd like to leave with us?
I think it's never being content with what you've got, because you can, like you've mentioned, you can always learn. It's looking at avenues of maybe giving yourself an additional point of view, because that's what debate is all about. Is one person's got one opinion, somebody else got another. You might come up with a third solution, and that might be more congruent with you. So it's looking at ways in which you can always learn. It doesn't have to be a book. It doesn't have to be, you could say podcast. I bashed myself with it, and nobody actually challenged it. But I did a Facebook Live a couple of weeks ago, as utilizing. Improving willpower without the normal motivators. So I bashed podcast, I bashed YouTube, I bashed books, and the example I used, podcast. But nobody challenged it. I was like, well, you could have done, because that's very hypocritical. But my point was, as it's not always has to be an external motivator. You've got to find it in with yourself to find that trigger or the fire within you that's going to push you through hardship. As what's the internal motivator? It's very difficult to find. The book, what's it called? It's James Clear's book, and the first chapter talks about happiness.
Yep.
But you can't use an external trigger.
Right.
I've still not answered that, but I'm happy with. It's like, well, okay, it can't be this, it can't be that, but hey, the external things don't dictate my happiness anymore. So it's finding the one thing that you're passionate about. I know people will talk about, why, purpose. Mm-hmm. To me, they're like woo-woo words. They don't mean anything. It's like, well, it just makes people overwhelmed, because it's like, well, what is my purpose? What is my reason why? But if I make it as to what you love, what makes you happy, that's a little bit easier to be able to conceptualize and to be able to take from, because like, well, your passion might be podcasting, your passion might be walking, could be hiking, dancing, It's what makes you happy, and obviously you're going to do it on a consistently basis, because it's like, well, I'm not doing it because it's exercise, I'm not doing it because I go to speak to other individuals, I'm not doing it because this, that, or the other. I'm learning from these experiences. Obviously podcasting is easy because you're having conversations with people, so you're going to learn something from somebody. Doesn't matter how small or how big. If somebody says something impactful, you're going to go away and maybe analyze it as to what does James mean by that? How does it mean to me? You might implement it as, okay, that's made such an impact on me, or let's run with that. So it's coming back to the passion and what makes you happy.
No, thank you. That was excellent, and thank you so much for your time. And we'll put in the links, all the ways to contact you. But could you just tell us some ways to contact you? We heard Facebook and Instagram. How about anything else?
You can find me by my website, jamesowenroberts.com. All my social media handles are the same, so I've made it as easy as obviously easier for me, because then it's just changing certain prefixes, but they've all got a meaning to me. So, but it makes it easier for everybody else. Okay, Facebook is this, Instagram is that, all the same across the board. Okay,
awesome. And really, what you were saying is really, finding that peace and love in your life is really important. It's that sort of that purpose, but if you don't take the action, that's the really part about podcasting or anything else, is if you don't take the action, bring that bat, knowing your non-negotiables, knowing your boundaries, but taking that swing and making sure you hit that sweet spot and hit it out of the park. So thank you so much, James, for today's talk and giving us so much knowledge. And everybody else, find that peace and love in your life and make sure you hit your sweet spot. Thank you. I'm really glad that you're enjoying our show. Peace, Love, and Bring a Bat is brought to you by Launchpad 516 Studios. Executive produced by David Chemetsky and George Andriopoulos. Music selections by James Grant, Zach Nelson, and James Gaither, and licensed through Storyblock. Sound effects and sponsorship music licensed through Epidemic Sound. Peace, Love, and Bring a Bat is hosted with Podbean. Subscribe to our show wherever podcasts are available. And don't forget to leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and share with all of your friends. Follow us on Facebook at Peace, Love, and Bring a Bat. Follow me, Uncle Dave Shemetsky, on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Clubhouse. You can find all those links and more info at davidchemetsky.com. For show ideas, feedback, guest inquiries, or just a chat, reach out to me at peacelovebringabat@gmail.com. For sponsorship and media inquiries, reach out to peacelovebringabat@lp516.com. Make sure to follow all the great podcasts produced by Launchpad 516 Studios. Today's journey has come to a close, my friends. I hope the seeds of peace and love continue to grow for each one of you. Remember that peace and love surrounds you and will assist you to rise again. But don't forget to bring it back for what you believe in. Namaste.